Hi, I'm Rick Steves, and this time we're sailing to the remote and fascinating island of Malta. Welcome aboard. The captain of our cruise ship advised being up early to enjoy the entry into the grand harbor of Malta, the historic heart of this remote island serving 3 cities, including the capital city of Valletta. Clearly, this port was well worth some serious fortifications. And with the different port everyday schedule of our cruise, we'll have a busy day to explore it. Our ship just squeezes into the historic harbor, and in moments, we're in the old center of town, ready for a full day of sightseeing. Malta is a tiny, independent country set between Sicily and Africa. With a culture enriched by a long parade of civilizations, it's a strategically placed island nation with an extraordinary history. The capital city of Valletta is a stony monument to this hard-fought history. Government buildings seem to demand obedience. And a commanding view from the ramparts of the heavily fortified harbor reminds the visitor of Malta's strategic importance through the centuries. Today, it seems the main strategy is staying out of the sun. The charming Baraka Gardens are filled with people enjoying the shade and the refreshing ambience of a fountain. The sleepy island vibe is easy to experience on a daisa, the traditional Maltese gondola. These quaint vessels stay busy shuttling people across the harbor, nowadays with the help of a very non-traditional outboard motor. Or you can just check out the local gang fishing. Of the many cultures that shaped it, perhaps the most obvious is its British heritage. Malta spent 150 years as part of the British Empire. In World War II, it was a key Allied naval base and therefore was devastated by German bombs. Much of Malta has been rebuilt in recent years. While it gained its independence in 1964, Malta retains its British flavor. English-style pubs and food, statues of queens, and red phone booths. While its first language is a Semitic language called Maltese, English is virtually universally understood. If this feels like a fortress city, it's because it was the capital of the Knights of St. John, also known as the Knights of Malta. The Knights of St. John were headquartered on the Isle of Rhodes. But in 1523, they were defeated by the Ottoman Turks. They retreated here to Malta, where they set up their new capital and built a huge fortress in anticipation of another Turkish attack. Malta's stout walls, many of them incorporated into existing limestone cliffs, survived a siege in 1565 of 40,000 Ottoman sailors. The stately Grand Master's Palace is a reminder that most of the stonework in this stony city dates to the period that followed. It's called the Knights period from 1530 to 1798. That's when this was the leading city of the Knights of Malta. The grid plan of streets was laid out with the new fortress. After the Turkish threat passed, the city was ornamented with delightful architecture, including characteristic enclosed balconies called galleria. As you stroll, you'll enjoy an inviting and nostalgic patina of age in its facades. Like so much of Valletta, St. John's Co-Cathedral, Malta has 2 cathedrals, dates from the Knights period. While austere outside, its interior is fabulously Baroque. Inlaid marble memorial slabs honor several hundred Knights of Malta, each listing that aristocratic knight's accomplishments. The Order of St. John was represented by 8 countries, and each had a chapel here at the Order's High Church. This chapel was from Aragon. Paintings tell the story of the Order, how the Knights were originally serving knights whose mission was to care for pilgrims venturing to the Holy Land, how they evolved into a military power with a mighty navy, and how ultimately Christianity would triumph over the Muslims. A highlight is the largest canvas ever painted by Caravaggio, the beheading of St. John the Baptist, Painted in 1609, he gave it to the cathedral. Notice his signature mastery of the play of light. The Maltese cross is the symbol of the Order of the Knights of Malta. The knights wore it on their robe. The cross represented the 4 virtues, and its points, the 8 beatitudes, as well as the 8 countries making up the multinational order. Within a short drive from the main city are a number of interesting sights. Sleepy towns come with both oversized churches and laid-back locals. Tiny and remote harbors hide out along the dramatic and rugged coastline. Local guides take tourists to numerous nooks and crannies, including the island's Blue Grotto. The landscape, which seems timeless, is dotted with prehistoric ruins dating back an astounding 5,000 years. Megalithic sites like Hajj Arkim are evidence that in roughly 3000 BC, settlers from Sicily arrived in search of arable land. While the humble mud brick village that once surrounded this temple is long gone, stones from the temple still stand. Archaeologists believe this was a temple to a fertility goddess, and that it functioned as a celestial calendar. Malta, dotted with small family farms, has been terraced since ancient times. Rock walls defend against erosion. Without them, the thin layer of topsoil would be lost to the steady Mediterranean wind. The land feels burned off. Locals are nostalgic about the days just a few years ago when it used to rain more. A short drive away is the fishermen's harbor of Marjaslak. A favorite with cruise travelers, it's home to a fleet of typically Maltese fishing boats. While Marjaslak has a fine main square and church, the action is along the harbor, especially during the Sunday market when it's all about fish. Tradition says that the shape of the boats goes back 8 centuries before Christ, to when Malta was a Phoenician colony. These colorful boats pop in the dazzling sunlight, seeming to celebrate yet another distinct heritage of the Mediterranean world. I hope you've enjoyed our fascinating look at the island of Malta. I'm Rick Steves. Until next time, keep on traveling. For a great day trip from Naples, Positano, or Sorrento, catch the early morning jet boat to the Isle of Capri. The Isle of Capri was first made famous as the vacation hideaway of Roman emperors. In the 19th century, it was the haunt of romantic age aristocrats on their grand tour of Europe. While the island is small, just 4 miles by 2 miles, there's plenty to see and do. To get the most out of our quick visit, I'm meeting my friend and fellow tour guide, Roberta Mazzarella. Our first stop is the reason most come to Capri, to enter the fabled Blue Grotto. The Blue Grotto experience is more than just visiting a cave. Getting there, getting in, and getting back is a scenic hoot. You enjoy a fast cruise partway around the gorgeous island, seeing bird life and local fishermen at work, all under dramatic limestone cliffs.
So most of the Isle of Capri is just like this. Limestone cliff straight down into the beautiful blue water. Look at this cliff. From the water all the way up to the top, Roman emperors loved this because it was easy to defend.
Arriving at the mouth of the grotto, you find a busy distribution center. As the tourist-laden boats arrive, awaiting dinghies converge and visitors clamber gingerly into their little boats. The entry hole is small. If the water's too rough, it becomes too dangerous. Dinghies can't get in, and visitors are turned back. We're lucky today. There's a little chop, but dinghies are squeezing in. The rayfish rowers jostle their way to the tiny hole. Tourists scrunch down safely below the gunnels, and the guides pull fast and hard on the cable at the low point of the swells to squeeze you into the grotto. Inside the 60-yard-long cave, the sun reflects off the limestone bottom, giving the grotto its famous brilliant blue. Your man rows you around, sings a little O Solo Mio, and lets you enjoy the iridescent magic of the moment. Capri, the largest of the island's two towns, sits in a saddle above the port. Piazza Umberto is the main square of this cute and touristy shopping town. The main drag is nicknamed Rodeo Drive for its exclusive boutiques. While prices are steep, the window shopping's free. These days, especially in the summer, Capri can be a world-class tourist trap, packed with gawky visitors searching for the rich and famous and finding only their prices. But other times of year, we're here in April, it provides a relaxing and scenic break. At the edge of town, elegant villas and a public garden are strategically placed to enjoy fine views. On glitzy Capri, everything's done with panache. Taxis are white convertibles. Though expensive, they make getting around an unforgettable part of your visit. The island's second town, Anna Capri, has fewer tourists, a little more character, and a passion for colorful Maiolica tiles.
These are Maiolica tiles. We can see them everywhere, in Napoli, on the Amalfi Coast, here in Capri, on the domes of the churches, on the floors, on decorating people's homes.
And squares like this.
And the squares are like this one. Just glaze tiles. What makes them special? The colors. We love colors here.
The town's celebrated San Michele Church has a remarkable Maiolica floor showing paradise on earth in a classic 18th century Neapolitan style. Ironically, the church's floor is so gorgeous that pews for worshippers are replaced by a boardwalk for tourists. The entire floor is ornately tiled, featuring a sword-wielding angel driving Adam and Eve from paradise. The devil is wrapped around the trunk of a tree laden with trouble-causing apples. The animals, with curiously human expressions, seem blissfully ignorant of this momentous event. For expansive island views, ride the chairlift to the top of Monte Solero, Capri's 1,900-foot summit. You'll float over lush orchards and well-tended gardens. At the summit, you'll enjoy the commanding panorama of both the Italian mainland in the distance and the Isle of Capri. Cliffs are busy with birds, enjoying a little R&R break during their migration, tending scenic nests, and soaring on a steady sea breeze. The Fariglioni Rocks are an icon of the island, with tour boats squeezing through every few minutes. And from here, the hike down is a delight. It's clear to me why Roman emperors chose this island as their holiday escape, and why today so many travelers include the Amalfi Coast in their Italian travel plans. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rick Steves. Until next time, keep on traveling. Ciao. Offering some of Scotland's best scenery, the Isle of Skye is understandably popular. Narrow, twisty roads wind around Skye in the shadows of craggy, bald mountains, and the coastline is ruffled with peninsulas and sea locks or saltwater inlets. Skye, while Scotland's second biggest island, about a 2-hour drive from south to north, has only 13,000 residents. And it's been that way since the Highland clearances back in the 1800s. That's when wealthy landlords decided sheep were better for their bottom line than people. Landless peasants were driven out, and to this day, the island's population is half what it used to be. While plenty of tour buses cover Skye, it's a great place to have your own wheels. The island is dotted with scenic roadside attractions. The Sligachen Bridge offers a classic Skye view and a good reminder to stop the car and get out. The Cuillin Mountains tower high above, and above the bridge looms the cone-shaped Glamag Hill. Around here, people really know how to have fun with nature. As a matter of fact, every summer there's a race from the bridge to the top of that mountain and back. Last year's winner, 44 minutes. If you know where to look, the island is strewn with the scant remains of past civilizations. Just a short hike from a handy parking lot is Skye's best preserved Iron Age fort, Dunbeg. To get the most out of our Isle of Skye road trip, I'm joined by my friend and fellow tour guide, Cullen Mayers. Exploring this prehistoric stone tower connects us with Skye's distant past. Judging from these stones, the tower once stood much taller. I love scrambling through ruined castles, and this one is particularly evocative.
Well, people have been living on the Isle of Skye for thousands of years, and this place, if you imagine, it probably had a timber frame inside, 3 stories high. They would get in here and under times of attack. They could gather in here, the community, men, women, children, and their domesticated animals, and we think this was built around about 2,000 years ago.
Skye's best home base is the town of Portree, nestled deep in its protective harbor. Portree, with its narrow streets and humble shops, restaurants, and hotels, is the island's largest town and tourism center. As Skye gets more and more popular, Portree gets jammed with visitors in the summer. The harbor side, once busy with its historic kelp gathering and herring fishing economy, like the rest of the town, is now dedicated to tourism. Fish and chips is a standby for a cheap lunch. Grab a spot and enjoy the view. But be on guard, those seagulls are hungry too. Hey! Well, the gulls are well fed, and now it's our turn. Time for a pub lunch. We're here in July, and every restaurant in town is busy with tourists, many escaping the heat of southern Europe for the cool of the north. Places that take pride in their food have raised pub grub to new levels. Creative dishes, fresh vegetables, and salads. And anywhere in Britain, I go for the local beer. Here on the island, it's Skye Gold. The highlight of our Isle of Skye visit is driving around the scenic Trotternish Peninsula. The coast is lined with jaw-dropping cliffs plunging into the sea. This one's nicknamed Kilt Rock because its volcanic lava columns look like pleats in a Scottish kilt. A steep climb inland leads to a trailhead at the summit of the Trotternish Ridge. Man, we're lucky to have a place to park. Skye is well discovered these days, but you can still get away from the crowds. Make a point to get out of the car and take a hike. From here, we enjoy the easy walk across a dramatic escarpment called the Kirang. Hikers are richly rewarded, enjoying unforgettable views of the Isle of Skye and the distant mainland. In addition to the stunning scenery, there's history and heritage in the land. We stopped at a peat bog that tells a story. Until a generation ago, bogs like these, where organic matter is slowly working its way to becoming coal, were harvested to heat homes. So this is a peat spade.
Yep, so that's used for cutting the peats. And it's a task like chopping firewood. It's a matter of survival, really. Peat was really important for people historically in the Isle of Skye. So you would cut the peat from a bog like this, then you dry it out first, put it on the fire, and that lets off a sweet, smoky smell. It's used through the harsh winter, heats the home, provides a fuel source for cooking. It's used widely in the whisky industry, and I really love the smell of burning peat.
The fine little Skye Museum of Island Life explains how a typical Skye family lived back in the days when peat was vital to survival. So what is this?
So this is a crofting community, and it shows how people used to live in Skye. This was quite typical in the 1800s, and a croft is basically a small-scale farm. So small-scale subsistence farming. They didn't own the land, but they lived off the land and paid a rent as well.
So this is where the family gathered.
Yep, this is a typical household setting for 1800s Skye.
So the kitchen would have been where the action is?
Yep, so they're all around the hearth. You've got the peat burning on the fire, and that's burning day and night. People gather around here and they've got things to keep them amused, keep them entertained. They've got a Bible in the Gaelic language because they spoke Gaelic here. They've got musical instruments and that would give them some entertainment as well. People would get together and have a céilí. So a céilí is a get together. They have a bit of a gossip, a bit of a drink, maybe some whiskey, and then that leads into playing some music, some dancing, and we still use the term céilí today.
So they'd gather around the peat fire, they've got their whiskey, they've got their bagpipe, their fiddle, and their accordion.
Yeah, what else do you need?
Neighbors.
Yeah.
Farm communities like this had to be self-sufficient. A blacksmith made all the tools, and clothing was woven from local wool.
The people here were self-sufficient to make their own clothes as well, and they basically could take the wool from their own sheep, they'll spin it into yarn, dye it, and then weave it into tweed on this loom. So the loom was kept very busy.
I hear the word tweed a lot when I'm in Scotland. What is that?
So tweed is basically a coarse woolen cloth, and very famous from this part of the world. The most famous really comes from the neighbouring island of Harris.
Oh, the Isle of Harris is just over there.
Yep, there's Harris.
The north tip of the Trotternish Peninsula is marked by the crumbling remains of the Duntullum Castle. This was the first stronghold on Skye of the influential MacDonald clan. It offers another wind-blown chance to savor how history and nature mix it up here on the Isle of Skye. The Orkney Islands, perched an hour's ferry ride north of the mainland, are remote, historic, and, for the right traveler, worth the effort. Orkney's dramatic cliffs and rock formations seem to herald a different world. The ferry lands in the tiny port of Stromness. Stony and humble, you immediately feel an island kind of charm. Orkney's landscape is mostly flat and bald, with few trees and lots of tidy farms. The blustery weather keeps the vegetation low and scrubby. Trees just can't grow in the Orkney winds. With its sparse population, the island has no traffic lights. Most roads are single lane, and driving here is a joy. Fine sandy beaches seem always empty, as if lying on them will give you hypothermia. Orkney, an archipelago of 70 islands, has about 25,000 people. The main island is called, confusingly, mainland. The vast majority of Arcadians live in Kirkwall. Tidy and functional, this town's buildings are more practical than pretty. Its pedestrians-only main drag leads from the cathedral down to the harbor. It's a workaday strip, lined with simple shops and busy with locals who all seem to know each other. At the harbor, fishing boats bob and ferries fan out to nearby islands. Today's economy is based mostly on North Sea oil and fishing. The local pipe band brings a ruddy, distinctly Orcadian groove to the town center. It's a toe-tapping energy as everybody gathers together. St. Magnus Cathedral towers above the town center. With centuries of tombstones and its weathered red sandstone, it's a reminder of a long-ago era that shaped this island's culture. The church was built in the 12th century when Orkney was ruled by Norway. In fact, it was part of a Norwegian parish. Norway is just 170 miles across the sea. The Vikings established Orkney as a trading post in the 9th century, and it stayed under Norwegian rule for 600 years. That's why this culture feels more Scandinavian than Celtic. The old Orcadian language, many town names, and the folklore, all Nordic. Stepping inside, you're struck by the stout and harmonious Romanesque design, with its arcade of round arches leading to what must have been an awe-inspiring high altar in the Middle Ages. Orkney is small, and its countryside charms are just minutes away by car. To get the most out of our time here, we're joined by my friend and fellow tour guide, Kinley Francis.
Beauty and ancient history. Orkney has two big draws: World War sites and some of the best prehistoric sites in Northern Europe. Orkney at one stage was the centre of civilization back in the Stone Age.
The island is dotted with monuments recalling the island's distant past. The stones of Stennis, part of a dozen stones that made a big circle, are a reminder that 5,000 years ago, Orkney had a busy civilization, with more people then than there are here today. At the far western shore, Skye Brae illustrates how some Neolithic people lived. They hunkered down in subterranean homes, connected by tunnels.
There's a big community, 150 people living here at one stage. A third of the village remains. 2/3 were taken away by the North Atlantic. People lived under the ground in stone-type igloo buildings with turf roofs. And they lived under the ground to keep the weather out, to keep them warm. They were powered by oil lamps with whale oil and whalebone basins, and a very nice-looking community.
And all of this was accomplished without the use of metal tools. This, after all, was the Stone Age, before people learned to make and use metals. A few miles away, sitting quietly in what seems like just another field, is a remarkable burial mound. Maeshowe is the finest chambered tomb north of the Alps. For 5,000 years, people have lowered their heads to enter this sacred place.
Wow, this is great. Tell me about this place.
This is a burial chamber. And to our right and our left and behind you are 3 tombs. On winter solstice at sunset, the sun streams through this position here and illuminates the back chamber. The stone is sandstone, and it's been hand carved and corbelled, vaulted into position to make this beautiful chamber. And how Neolithic man managed to build this structure, no one really knows.
Orkney's arc of scattered islands forms one of the world's largest natural harbors. It's called Scapa Flow. In the 10th century, Vikings sheltered their warships here. And 1,000 years later, in the 20th century, so did the British. Scapa Flow was a critical base for Britain's Royal Navy.
Back during World War I, to prevent German U-boats from sneaking between the little islands that define this harbor, dozens of old ships were intentionally sunk to block the gaps.
You can still see many of these block ships breaking the surface today. But they didn't really do the job, as Britain learned tragically at the start of World War II.
In 1939, a few weeks after the start of the Second World War, a German U-boat slipped through a position just like this into Scapa Flow and torpedoed a British battleship at anchor. Over 800 men were lost. As a result of this, the British sent tens of thousands of troops here to Orkney to fortify the island with gun batteries and ships and airfields, and it became known locally as Fortress Orkney.
Britain built barriers to make the harbor safe from more surprise attacks. Winston Churchill visited and decided to connect the islands by building causeways out of concrete blocks. Today, tourists drive along these Churchill barriers as they explore the island. Orkney's most charming wartime site is its Italian chapel.
Italian prisoners of war helped to build the Churchill barriers. They were given these 2 prefab Quonset huts, and during their free time, they were allowed to scavenge whatever wartime scraps they could find to decorate them. They built a beautiful little Catholic chapel that reminded them of their homeland.
Inside, you can see the creative work of those Italian prisoners. Light fixtures made from ration tins, candle holders fashioned from brass shell casings, and painted windows with the illusion of radiant stained glass. Above the altar, Mary holds the baby Jesus, who holds an olive branch, a kind of prayer for peace. The chapel was completed in 1944, just 2 months before the Italians who built it were free to go home.